over West Africa, Portugal in Egypt, and Britain in East Africa. Leopold and the French also had conflicts in Central Africa over the Congo area. The German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, whose country was considered an imperial power, also picked up interest in laying claims to African lands. He sought to resolve these conflicts by calling for the Berlin Conference. Bismarck felt these conflicts arose because there was no equal distribution of access to the economic advantage Africa provided, and called for the conference to resolve these irregularities. This proves that the purpose of the Berlin Conference was largely economical and not for developing the African states. Countries such as the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Belgium, Denmark, France, Great Britain, Italy, the Netherlands, Portugal, Russia, Spain, Sweden, Norway, and the Ottoman Empire were represented at the conference. The conference began on November 15, 1884, and went on for 14 weeks and 5 days, ending on February 26 of 1885. In the Berlin Conference, territories claimed by European countries were to be legalized, formalized, and then drawn on the map to avoid further conflict. Trade routes were also agreed upon amidst colonies, and a framework for colonizing territories was created. Explorers were to be sent out to explore the African lands. Then, they would proceed to offer protection to the indigenous people of that land by signing treaties with them. Finally, the European explorers or ambassadors would return to their home country with the treaty signed. Then, the government of that country would inform or negotiate with other European countries so that their claim over the African territory would be recognized and uncontested. In all of these establishments, Africans were not included or considered, although it was their land that was being divided. They were regarded as incapable of ruling themselves. It would also be interesting to note that most of the time, the indigenous rulers did not even understand what the treaty was about or what they were signing. In some scenarios, these treaties were signed by makeshift leaders who did not exactly have the authority to do so. However, one African leader saw through the tricks of the Europeans. Menelik, an important leader in Ethiopia who would eventually become emperor, wrote a letter to the participants of the conference clearly stating that Ethiopia would not be needing their protection. Although his letter was ignored, Ethiopia and Liberia were the only African states that were not colonized in the scramble. The Sultan of Zanzibar begged to be present at the conference, but to no avail. Little did he know that he was to be part of the main topic of discussion. The General Act was the outcome of the Berlin Conference, and it made provisions for different trade routes and the framework for colonization. It addressed different issues bordering on the colonization of the African states. It confirmed the Congo Free State as the private property of King Leopold II, and also confirmed the free trade proposal by making the Niger and Congo rivers free for ship traffic. The General Act also included the signing of the international prohibition of the slave trade. More importantly, it established the principle of effectivity, which stated that powers could only possess colonies if they actually possessed them. This also meant that any country which wanted possession of any territory in Africa would notify other signatory powers for formalization and recognition. The Berlin Conference was a glaring disregard for Africans. The Europeans saw their views, opinions, and ownership over their lands as irrelevant. 14 countries were duly represented at the conference, and at its conclusion, 8 out of the 14 countries started possessing different parts of the African regions. The 6 other participants, such as Austria-Hungary, Russia, Denmark, the Netherlands, Sweden, Norway, and the United States, did not take any formal possession of any part of Africa. However, by the end of the 19th century, all African states except Ethiopia and Liberia had been colonized by the Europeans. After the Berlin Conference ended in 1885, it led to the creation of African countries by forcefully merging different ethnic groups, cultures, languages, and people. This, of course, overrode the existing groupings, boundaries, and regions within the continent. The conference legalized what was not legal and created a ground for cooperation between the European countries on taking over the African states. The European countries claimed to offer protection to the countries they overtook.